Hey everybody, welcome into the Weekly Wellness Podcast at My Pets Wellness. My name is Kevin Crispin. I am the Chief of Staff at My Pets Wellness. It's great, as always, to have you in here. Per usual, I've got our Director of Wellness and Personal Growth, Dr. Rodney. How are you doing, Dr. Rodney?
I'm doing really well today. Thank you very much.
Good. Glad to hear it, sir. And we have a special guest today, right here in between Dr. Rodney and myself. We have our Executive Medical Director, Dr. Jason Epstein. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great, man.
Doing great?
Yeah.
You're real laid back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. All right, cool. So today there's a what's everybody thinking about? What's everybody talking about?
COVID.
Thank you. Nice work, Dr. Rodney. COVID is right. And I know, Dr. Jason, you practiced some in our Daytona location back in June.
Yep.
So you have some firsthand experience of practicing in the COVID environment. So we want to kind of go into that, talk about what the challenges are, what's different about it. So let's start with when you were practicing down in Daytona. Were there any differences in what you were doing per what you did pre-COVID in that short span?
Yeah. To be honest, not a ton. We hadn't actually implemented a ton of restrictions. Florida kind of had their own way of going about things. So there was a level of concern in the back of my mind, though. And that was what was really new is for the first time, you're kind of worried about, like, is this person that's coming into the room with me, could they get me and my family and people I come into contact with sick? Like, should I be more worried than I was? So we didn't have a lot of the restrictions in place that a lot of other practitioners do. And I've had those conversations with a lot of friends, with our doctors now in New York and Dallas.
Right.
The
restrictions that are in place now. So give us a good example of what one of those is that definitely totally changes the environment.
Yeah. So the biggest thing we all are adjusting to as a profession is the switch from having our clients no longer in the building or no longer in the exam room.
Yeah.
And then in the rare instance where they are, most of your face is covered up with a mask. And a big part of engaging with clients and allowing us to take care of our patients is being able to connect and read our clients. I really value being able to bond with my clients. That's something that I love about my profession. And it's hard when they're in a car on the phone.
Oh, for sure, especially if you have the patient. So to clarify, this is something that took me a few days to learn once I came into the vet world. There's the client who's the pet parent, and then there's the patient who's the pet. Okay, so I'm sure if you're watching this, you know that, but I thought I'd lay that out there for you.
I didn't know.
You didn't know it's him? And he's a director. So have you, wow, I mean, you're attending to a patient and being on the phone with the client. And I love what you said about the connection that you want to have with the client, because this is generally going to be not just something they own, but a part of their family. And so you talk about that connection that you make with the client. Even, let's just forget about COVID for a second. Talk about how you make that connection with the client.
Yeah, so for me, that's one of the founding reasons I love my job is building those relationships. And it comes through being genuine. It comes through being empathetic, and it's hard to do when you can't be face to face. It's hard to do when you can't read body language or read the small subtleties of facial expressions to go with what the words you're hearing are. We've all in the profession, most vets or technicians or receptionists have had an experience where your perception of someone is very different on the phone versus when they walk in the building.
Yeah, absolutely.
So not having the opportunity to have that person walk in the building, not having the opportunity to build that human connection. And even if their face is covered up, there's only so much you can read from the nose up.
Yeah.
And it's hard to have that connection.
From the other side, though, I imagine that client, the pet owner, the pet parent, is going to be pretty averse to not being in that exam room when their patient, when the patient is being examined. So it's it's two forces there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and you or other veterinarians that you know have, I'm sure, dealt with that.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
far.
there've been a lot of creative ways that clinics have adapted. I've read stories where there are hospitals that are fortunate they have a big glass front window. Like one of their exam rooms has a whole glass wall, and so
they kind of stand outside and watch.
They do their exams in front of that wall, so that that window, so those clients can be right on the other side, and they can have them on speaker, so they can kind of have that experience, but from a distance. But it's not always something that we're able to overcome.
Sure.
I've got a really, really good friend of mine here in Nashville, and he recently had to say goodbye to one of his pets, and he had to do it over FaceTime because he wasn't allowed in the building, wasn't allowed in the room.
Tough.
And at the end of the day, it's important that we keep everyone safe.
Of course.
But that's an experience that none of us are prepared for how to handle. Yeah. The doctors, the technicians, the clients, like there's no winning with that experience. And so there's definitely challenges in this environment that none of us really anticipated.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, in My Pet's Wellness, the health of our staff and our customers is paramount. But then, of course, you do run into tricky situations, like your friend who was not able to be there for a euthanization. Not as grim if it's somebody coming in just they've got a bad shoulder or whatever it may be. How do you told us how you make the connection normally. How are you making that connection, even if it's somebody on the phone? What are you doing now that you weren't feeling you had to do before to keep that connection that you love about the job?
Yeah, and I'm going to preface that I haven't had to spend a lot of time in clinic lately, but I'm fortunate to have a lot of friends and colleagues that are. So I'm going to speak on their behalf. But I think the biggest way that you overcome that, it's very similar to a part of the practice we're all used to, which is drop-off appointments, to where the patient gets left in the morning and we have to do all the communication over the phone. So it makes the detail and the level of client education and the level of communication much more important. We can't overlook any little step now because we have purely our voice to go on. It has to be something where you're able to, you're able to educate, you're able to express empathy. It's there's no formula, man. It's not the easiest thing to do.
Especially when you're telling that bad news. At least if you have to pass that bad news on to a pet parent and they're in person, there are other tools that you have.
Yeah, like a hug.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's one of the things I have always hated most about the profession is there are times and there are days where you have to deliver really bad news and it's over the phone. So that is a challenge, but on the flip side, we're also able to give good news, and we're also able to give bills of clean health, and we're also able to call and say, hey, that estimate that was 400, we just spent 220, so you're good. So we're still able to deliver good news just as much as things we don't want to have to discuss. It's just a little bit harder, especially for doctors that have very hands-on ways of teaching. I'm a very visual person. I draw pictures for my clients. I get down on the floor, I'll draw things on whiteboards, and I'll make diagrams with my hands.
Sounds like our CEO.
So I'm very I have, that's how I connect, is I try to simplify, I try to draw it out, I try to visualize it. And so my style does not adapt well to this current environment. But we all have to kind of just get creative and come up with other ways to make it happen.
So again, what I just heard him say was
yes, sir.
That because of the whole COVID thing, that he has to adjust to many different situations that he hadn't seen before. He comes up with new ways of doing things. Can I ask you, have you seen an adjustment on the part of the clients, not the patients, the clients, in their attitude? Is it putting them on edge as well? Do you see that happening?
That's a good question.
I do. I think that there are tons of great clients that understand, that know the situation we're all in, and they are empathetic to their veterinarian, to their team, and they're very understanding of everything we're going through. But there are probably an equal amount that aren't quite as patient. I have heard, clinics across the country that, when COVID was at its worst and everyone was completely shut down, a lot of vet clinics went to emergencies, sick appointments only, medically necessary appointments only. And they were getting angry phone calls about nail trims, about, a really minor things. My dog needs this booster because it can't go boarding or it can't go to a groomer, that aren't medically necessary. They're not vital. And so there's only so much you can say to get empathy and understanding.
You don't see it as vital. I wouldn't see it as vital, but the client thinks it's a vital issue for their pet.
Right.
And then you have to re-educate them as far as, or is that kind of hard to do?
How would you have a conversation with somebody who says, all I need is a booster. I just want Winnie to be able to board. I'm going, I have to go visit somebody. All it needs is a booster. How do you explain to them, I totally get that, but in this current environment.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the challenge that a lot of veterinary receptionists and technicians have had to face. Because as doctors, we're pretty lucky that we don't have to handle a lot of those conversations.
True.
But, it's a matter of reminding the clients why we're in the situation in the first place. It isn't that Bordetella vaccine or your rabies booster or your whatever it is, or your dog getting its spay or neuter. It's not that these aren't important things. It's that we're in a situation where at the time, now we're opening back up a little more medically, but especially at its peak, we really didn't know what we were dealing with.
Yep.
And we saw what was going on in Italy, where they were just choosing, all right, well, if you're over this age or you're this condition, you don't get the treatment. And so, we were seeing situations unravel, and it was like, we can't take any extra risks. And so we can't bring more people into a facility. We can't expose our staff to any human or pet that has that humans dander, humans whatever on it, to our staff until we have a better understanding. So that's why we a lot of facilities shut down to sick appointments, emergencies, and that's it. And it was, a lot of clinics got a lot of pushback. A lot of vets had a lot of frustrated, stressed clients to manage and try to help them to understand why we're making these decisions.
And it speaks to something Dr. Rodney and I have spoken about on numerous podcasts now, where now the doctor is already having to set so many boundaries and already having to be clear in their communication to the client. And now this is just another hurdle and another way that the veterinarian, him or herself, has to navigate. They have to navigate through that. And that's going to cause stress, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, none of us want to turn away an owner or a pet in need. I've always worked in environments where I've told the staff that if they're worried, I'm worried. If you're worried about your pet, I'm worried about your pet. If it's an emergency to you, I'll do my best to work it in, even if I know that an ear infection can wait till tomorrow. Even if I know it can wait till tomorrow. If you feel like it's an emergency, I'll make it happen. I'll see your pet. But this is the first time in my career that if I were in practice and someone calls me like, I have to be seen, you go, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Because we're responsible for everyone in that building.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we just got to make public health decisions rather than business or medical decisions.
And it just totally, the way that you just described, the way you approach your job, it seems like it turned it all on its head, because it's like, well, that's one of the key things, as you said. I feel what you feel. I am at the place where you are. But now with COVID, you can't.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely has tied some hands and made it a lot more of a challenge. I mean, I think we've all worked in a facility where if a client you pick up the phone, the answer is yes. What's the question? That's the attitude.
Yeah,
that's the attitude. And so for the first time in a while, we're setting some boundaries. In a lot of ways, that's good, but it's not easy for a client to perceive.
Sure. I want to, for everybody watching at home, point out, I know we've all kind of motioned to the floor. There is a dog down here, Winnie. She's a good girl.
Get
She's a
up.
boxer.
No.
She's not interested in getting up right now, but she is down there. So just that's why we keep pointing to the floor.
Yeah.
So last question for you, Jason. What? Oh,
Hi, Winnie.
hi, Winnie. What? What advice would you give to doctors now who are working in this COVID environment that would help them balance that and find find the ability to set those boundaries for emergency versus non-emergency, and also to build that connection that you so treasure, and I'm sure that most veterinarians do treasure. What advice would you give to them?
It's a hard question.
Thank you.
It's a hard question.
Thank you.
Wow. So I would say, as far as I'm going to take this two steps, because to me, boundaries and engaging in this new version of VetMed are two separate things. And so when it comes to boundaries, I think we all struggle to tell our clients no, whether that is, no, you can't have my email address, or no, I'm not going to respond to your Facebook message because you tracked me down because you have my first and last name. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to realize that in an era of COVID, with public health being such an issue, that it's okay to set boundaries that even restrict what clients are allowed to expect of you in a clinical environment. It's okay to tell someone, no, we're not going to work you in for an annual. We're not going to work in extra people for something that is wellness unnecessary. And it comes down to risk to the staff. If they're not willing to comply with whatever your protocols are to keep you and your staff safe, mm-hmm. then they can find a clinic that doesn't have those same values and protocols in place. And it's not worth a client to risk lives when it comes to this thing. So boundaries are a good thing. We've just got to find a way to embrace them as a profession.
Yeah, and you kept saying be okay. And again, this calls back to what we've talked a lot about, exactly. Dr. Rodney, is allowing ourselves to be okay with those boundaries and not putting all of that pressure on ourselves, especially in such an empathetic field as a veterinarian.
You should never feel guilty for taking care of ourselves and taking care of our staff, taking care of the clients and the patients. But oftentimes, when faced with setting boundaries, we have that sense of guilt, which is a false sense of guilt.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I've spent many a night from 7 to 10 p.m. on the phone with people that have contacted me on Facebook or Google Voice or email, and it's a balance between being grateful that my clients care and about me that much, that they've found me even if I'm not in practice, versus I should be relaxing because this is the only 2 hours a day I get to disconnect. Yeah, right.
And then you're like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, and then the next day, etc.
To answer the rest of your question,
yes.
I think that despite all of the challenges, as a profession, one of the things that we are best at as veterinarians is empathy and connecting. And so continue to be genuine and be transparent with your clients that you wish they could be in the room. You wish you could be there with them. Verbalize how you're feeling and that you miss that interaction as well. Let them know that, let them know you're wanting that as well. And I think that will go a long way, rather than just the same old of like, all right, yep, Fluffy looks good. His leg's got a cut on his leg. I'm going to clean it up and we'll get you home. There's a difference between that and, man, I really wish I'd be able to come in here. I could show you and go over this, but spend that extra minute connecting on a human level. That's what I spoke with one of our teams the other day, and I was like, spend an extra 2 minutes when you're checking somebody in and talk to them about their life. Like, where are you from? What's your favorite restaurant? Those are the little things that build that connection. I don't have the world's greatest memory when it comes to the details of my clients' lives, but that's why medical records exist. And you can put things in the corner that's like, daughter takes ballet. So the next time you come in, you're like, hey, your daughter, did she have a ballet thing coming up? How'd it go? Putting that extra effort to make a human connection is not easy, but that's what what pays dividends down the road, because you really get to connect with your clients on a human level, which makes them want to trust you with their family members.
Wow, I mean, I think that's a great place to end. That's really well said, Dr. Jason. So thank you for that. And everybody, first and foremost, stay safe out there during these times. As we said at My Pets Wellness, the safety of our staff and our clients is paramount. So, and we know that for veterinarians who are practicing in other places, it's going to often be the same. So everybody stay safe and be good to each other. And thank you for tuning in here. Again, if you have any other questions or want to check out more about us, you can see more about us at mypetswellness.net. So, Dr. Jason, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Of course, thanks.
Dr. Rodney, as always. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we will see you every Wednesday here on the Weekly Wellness Podcast at My Pets Wellness. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.